A maid finds something left behind in a hotel room, and what she sees changes her life forever. Would you give up your honesty for a chance to change your life? Sarah Mitchell, a dedicated maid, faces an unexpected situation in an empty hotel room. Confronted with a moral dilemma, the burden of her mother's medical bills, and the possibility of a better future, she must make a difficult choice. But what she doesn't know is that her decision will place her at the center of a dangerous police investigation. Discover how far she is willing to go to protect her integrity and change her destiny. Sarah Mitchell, a 35-year-old woman, wakes up at 5 in the morning, as she has done every day for more than a decade. The sky over Portland is still dark, and the heavy silence is broken only by the distant sound of the first cars heading to work. The city seems suspended in a moment of calm before the chaos of the day begins. In the small one-bedroom apartment she shares with her elderly and sick mother, the only sound is her mother's soft breathing from the other room, a comforting presence, but also a constant reminder of life's fragility. Sarah rises slowly, each joint protesting after yet another restless night of sleep. The apartment, though small, is cozy. The walls, yellowed with age, are adorned with old photos capturing happy moments from a distant past. The modest kitchen, with its worn cabinets and cracked tiles, exudes a familiar scent of fresh coffee, a fragrance that, for a brief moment, brings a sense of normalcy to her exhausting life. Sarah's routine is meticulously timed. She dresses in her maid's uniform, neatly folded on the chair beside her bed. As always, the fabric of the uniform, already worn and faded, is a silent symbol of her loyalty and diligence at work. For over a decade, she has performed her duties at the Rosewood Inn, a modest hotel in the city center. The hotel has become a second home to her, a place where her competence is recognized, but where the work has become a relentless routine. Sarah cares for her mother, whose health is in decline. She administers medications, prepares simple meals, and tries to keep the apartment clean despite the lack of time and energy. The weight of this responsibility, combined with financial difficulties, has become a constant in her life. Medical bills pile up, and her maid's salary barely covers the essential expenses. Sarah feels like she's in a race against time, trying to keep everything under control while the world around her seems to be falling apart. As she leaves home, the morning cold envelopes her, making her even more aware of the loneliness of her daily journey. The walk to the hotel is solitary, with the streets of Portland still asleep. The few people who pass by her are hurried strangers, immersed in their own worlds. Every step Sarah takes is marked by a sense of unease, as if something is about to happen, but she doesn't know what. Upon arriving at the Rosewood Inn, the familiar environment of the hotel should bring some comfort, but on that day, something feels different. The lobby, usually bustling with the arrival of early guests, is quieter than usual. Sarah notices that even her co-workers seem more reserved, almost as if they sense something is amiss. As she picks up her task list, Sarah notices that room 317, at the end of the third-floor corridor, is marked as vacant but without a checkout confirmation. This piques her curiosity. Something about the way the room was left intrigues her, but she doesn't let it show. She knows the hotel follows strict protocols, and the lack of checkout is an irregularity that needs to be investigated. Climbing the stairs to the third floor, Sarah feels a slight discomfort, a sense that something is out of place. The corridor is darker than usual, with some lights flickering intermittently, heightening the sense that something is wrong. When she finally reaches the door of room 317, she hesitates for a moment, her hand hovering over the doorknob. A part of her wishes the day were like any other, but another part knows that by opening that door, something in her life might change forever. As she turns the knob and opens the door, the scene she finds is disconcerting. The room, which should be empty, is filled with belongings scattered carelessly. A brown leather suitcase rests on the unmade bed, open, revealing clothes and personal items. Sarah's heart races as she approaches the suitcase. Each step feels heavy, as if she's moving through a dream. With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, Sarah looks inside the suitcase. What she sees takes her breath away. A bundle of thick envelopes, each stuffed with banknotes. Sarah's hands tremble as she touches the bundle. She has never seen so much money at once, and the sight of the perfectly stacked bills sends a wave of adrenaline through her. That moment, which should have been just another routine task, turns into a turning point. The moral dilemma strikes her immediately. The hotel's protocol is clear. Any found item must be handed over to the manager, but the amount of money leaves her paralyzed. For a moment, the thought of keeping the money crosses her mind. Like a shadow she tries to push away. She thinks of her mother, the medical bills, the hard life she leads. That money could change everything. But what would happen to her reputation, built on honesty? The internal conflict begins to grow. With a cloudy mind and racing heart, Sarah finishes tidying up the room, but her thoughts are miles away. The suitcase becomes a symbol of a life she never knew, a life where her financial worries could disappear. But at what cost? As the day progresses, Sarah finds herself confronted by a choice she never imagined she would have to make. Sarah leaves room 317 with trembling hands and a pounding heart. The narrow corridor seems to stretch out before her like an endless tunnel. Each step feels dragged, and the weight of what she has just discovered consumes her. The air in the hotel, usually a mix of cleaning products and cheap perfume, feels heavy, suffocating. She feels an urgent need to get away, to find a place where she can think clearly. But the echoing sound of her own footsteps in the corridor only amplifies the sense that she's doing something wrong. Trying to maintain her composure, Sarah heads to the cleaning cart. Her hands, still shaking, grip the edge of the cart tightly, as if she needs something to anchor her to reality. Her mind, however, is far from there, lost in the possibilities that the money represents. What initially seemed like a casual discovery now begins to transform into a moral dilemma that suffocates her. When she finally reaches the maid's break room, Sarah feels a temporary relief. It's a space she knows well, a place where light-hearted conversations and shared exhaustion among co-workers usually offer a reprieve from the day's challenges. But today, the room feels small, claustrophobic, and the sense of normalcy is broken. She locks herself in the bathroom, a small cubicle with cold tiled walls, and looks at herself in the mirror. The reflection she sees is of a woman struggling to keep control. The dark circles under her eyes and the worry lines on her forehead reflect months of accumulated stress. She doesn't fully recognize herself. The woman in the mirror seems like a stranger, someone being pushed to an unexpected crossroads. The decision she needs to make is overwhelming, and Sarah knows she can't delay much longer. Her mother's medical bills, the overdue rent, the life that always seems to be on the brink of collapse. All this runs through her mind in a whirlwind. As she takes a deep breath, trying to calm her thoughts, the tension is palpable. "I need to turn this into the manager," she mutters to herself, trying to convince herself, but the words sound empty, devoid of conviction. She has always been an honest person, a trait that has earned her respect but has also kept her trapped in a life of hardships. Now, the temptation to keep the money grows with every passing second, fueled by necessity and desperation. For a brief moment, she imagines what it would be like to use that money to change her life. Sarah visualizes paying off all the debts, ensuring her mother receives the best medical care, and perhaps even fulfilling some long-forgotten dreams. But with this visualization comes overwhelming guilt. What if someone desperately needs that money? What if, by keeping it, she's becoming what she has always despised? Dishonest? When she leaves the bathroom, the decision is still unclear. Sarah tries to continue her routine, cleaning other rooms, but her mind is obsessed with the suitcase in room 317. Every time she tries to focus on work, the image of the money returns to her mind, bringing with it a whirlwind of emotions. Fear, hope, guilt. The internal conflict only grows, and Sarah feels increasingly torn between her honesty and the desire to provide a better life for her mother. During lunch, Sarah sits alone in the hotel's cafeteria. The room, usually lively with laughter and conversations, feels strangely distant. The plate of food in front of her remains untouched. She has no appetite, only a growing unease that seems to be devouring her from within. The noises around her, the clinking of silverware, the muffled voices of her co-workers, seem distant, as if she were submerged in water. The loneliness she feels is overwhelming, a sense of being in a world apart where no one else can understand what she's going through. In the afternoon, Sarah decides she needs to act but still doesn't know how. After her shift, she returns to room 317. The suitcase is where she left it, untouched, as if waiting for her, daring her to make a decision. Her hands tremble as she picks it up, feeling the weight of the envelopes inside. Sarah looks at the door, making sure no one sees her. And then, in an impulse she doesn't fully understand, she decides to take the suitcase home. During the entire journey back to her apartment, her heart beats erratically. The streets of Portland, usually comforting in their familiarity, now seem strange, threatening. She feels like a criminal. Every face that passes her seems to be watching, judging. But at the same time, a strange sense of power rises within her. For the first time in a long time, Sarah feels like she's in control of something in her life. The weight of the money in the suitcase seems to match the weight of the responsibility she carries for her mother. But at the same time, there's a growing fear that this could destroy everything. When she arrives at her apartment, her mother is waiting for her in the living room, as she does every day. Her mother's face, tired and marked by illness, reminds her of everything that is at stake. "Are you okay, Sarah? You look worried," her mother asks, with a look that mixes affection and concern. I'm just tired," Sarah replies, trying to hide the tension in her voice. She takes the suitcase to her room and places it under the bed, as if hiding a dirty secret. She feels as if she has crossed an invisible line, a line she never imagined crossing. But her mind keeps racing, unable to find peace. She knows she's on a dangerous path, but what scares her most is the uncertainty about what she will do next. That night, lying in bed, Sarah can't sleep. The dilemma in her mind seems bigger than her, a choice that could define her entire future. The next morning, Sarah wakes up with the first rays of sunlight entering through the window. The faint, diffuse light of dawn fills the room with a melancholic clarity. Although she spent most of the night awake, there's a new and strangely calm determination within her. The suitcase is still hidden under the bed, like a secret that haunts her. The weight of the choice she needs to make feels lighter now, though it still carries enormous responsibility. As she has breakfast with her mother, the morning routine should be comforting, but Sarah's mind is far away, wandering through a field of uncertainties and fears. The conversation with her mother, usually a source of comfort, seems to be just background noise as Sarah reflects on the possible consequences of her actions. Each bite of food seems tasteless, as if the flavor had been drained by the tension she feels. Her mother, as perceptive as always, notices Sarah's distraction but chooses not to press her, believing it to be just the usual fatigue. The money in the suitcase represents possibilities Sarah never dared to imagine. She envisions a future where all her financial worries are eliminated, where her mother can receive the best medical care without money being a problem. She dreams of paying off all the debts and maybe even allowing herself a small luxury, something she hasn't indulged in for years. But along with these thoughts of hope comes crushing guilt. Could this money really bring happiness, or only more problems? On her way to work, Sarah loses herself in thoughts as she watches the city wake up. The people around her, hurried in their daily routines, seem oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions she's facing. Each step toward the hotel brings her closer to a decision that will change her life forever. The morning cold seems to cut her skin, amplifying her sense of vulnerability. The weight of guilt grows, and she begins to wonder if she can live with the decision to keep the money. Could she face her mother every day, knowing that their comfort was bought with dishonesty? When she arrives at the hotel, Sarah realizes that she can barely focus on her tasks. She passes by her co-workers without exchanging many words, immersed in her thoughts. Every room she cleans, every bed she makes, is a reminder of the choice she needs to make. The hotel walls, which once seemed safe, now oppress her, as if they're closing in around her. She feels as if she's being watched, as if at any moment someone might confront her about the suitcase. After her shift, Sarah knows she can't continue carrying the weight of the suitcase. She decides to take it to a safe place, away from her home. She walks to a bench in the park near the hotel, where she often goes to think. The park, usually a refuge of tranquility, now seems sinister, with the shadows of the trees lengthening in the evening light. Sitting there, with the suitcase beside her, she takes a deep breath. The park is quiet, with few people passing by, but the tranquility contrasts with the storm inside Sarah. She opens the suitcase again, looking at the envelopes full of money. The new bills gleam in the sunlight, but to Sarah, the shine is dimmed by the weight of responsibility. She closes her eyes for a moment, trying to imagine a life where the money was truly hers, a life without financial worries. However, the inner voice that has always guided her reminds her of the possible consequences. What if the money is the product of something illegal? What if dangerous people are involved? Sarah's imagination leads her to increasingly dark scenarios where the money brings more problems than solutions. Sarah realizes she needs to make a decision quickly. She gets up from the bench with the suitcase in hand, determined not to act impulsively. Instead, she decides to return home, but with the determination to do what is necessary the next morning. The dilemma is still present, but Sarah begins to accept that, regardless of the decision, the consequences will be inevitable. She needs to face her fears and find a solution that doesn't compromise her integrity, but at the same time, she can't ignore the urgent needs in her life. Sarah barely sleeps that night. Every time she closes her eyes, she sees the banknotes, feels the crushing weight of her decision. Her mind, usually a bastion of organization and discipline, is now in disarray, a chaos of conflicting thoughts. She hears the sounds of the city in the distance, the constant hum of cars, the distant sound of voices and laughter, but none of it comforts her. When she finally manages to doze off, she is haunted by disturbing dreams that leave her even more exhausted and confused. She wakes up before dawn, with a racing heart and a head full of uncertainties. The room where she sleeps, usually a refuge, now feels tight, as if the walls are closing in on her. Every object around her, from the simple lamp to the small radio on the bedside table, seems to carry the weight of her decision. The suitcase under the bed, hidden, becomes an unsettling presence, a dark secret that threatens to consume her. Her mother is still asleep when Sarah gets up. The apartment's living room is bathed in soft shadows, and the cold morning air seems to seep through every crack, intensifying the feeling of discomfort. Breakfast, which should be a moment of tranquility, is just another burden. As she prepares the meal, her movements are automatic, mechanical. The routine that once brought her comfort now oppresses her. She turns on the radio, as she does every morning, hoping to distract herself a little. The announcer's voice fills the room with the day's news, but most of the words pass by her without being absorbed. However, one specific sentence catches her attention, freezing her in place. Portland police are looking for a missing suitcase, which may be related to an ongoing financial fraud investigation. The suitcase, described as brown leather, was last seen at a downtown hotel. Sarah's blood runs cold. The description matches exactly the suitcase in her home. The weight of responsibility and fear falls upon her like an avalanche. The suitcase is not just an object left behind by a careless guest. It's connected to something much bigger and possibly dangerous. Suddenly, the idea of keeping the money becomes even more terrifying. If the money is indeed the product of fraud, Sarah could be getting involved in a crime without even realizing it. The guilt that already tormented her intensifies, and panic begins to take hold of her mind. She knows she needs to do something quickly, but the fear of being discovered and the consequences of that leave her paralyzed. After a few minutes of confusion and fear, Sarah makes a decision. She's going to return the suitcase to the hotel manager. She knows this is the right choice, even if it means giving up everything the money could provide. But before she can leave the house, she is interrupted again by a news alert on the radio. This time, it's not just regular news, but an emergency alert. The police are looking for a dangerous man suspected of being involved in criminal activities in the city. The alert details that the man might be disguised as a private detective and that he's looking for a large sum of money, possibly related to the fraud investigation. Sarah feels her stomach churn. Could the suitcase's owner, or someone connected to him, be looking for her? What if he finds out she has the money? Feeling increasingly pressured and confused, Sarah grabs the suitcase and leaves the house. She needs to go to the hotel, but she doesn't know if she should stick with her plan to return the suitcase to the manager or if she should go directly to the police. As she walks, her eyes alert to everything around her. The fear of being followed or approached grows. The cold morning air seems to cut her skin, amplifying her sense of vulnerability. When she arrives at the hotel, Sarah is greeted by a seemingly calm environment, but the nervousness consumes her. She climbs up to the third floor where the manager, Mark, usually works. When she's about to head to his office, a tall, well-dressed man approaches. "Excuse me, miss. I'm Detective David Monroe. I'm investigating an important case and would like to know if you've found anything unusual recently in any of the rooms." Sarah feels a chill run down her spine. The man seems trustworthy, but the words she heard on the radio echo in her mind. Trying to stay calm, she replies, "No, I haven't found anything. Sorry, I can't help." The man studies her for a moment, then hands her a business card. "If you remember anything, please contact me. Could be important." Sarah nods and quickly walks away, her heart pounding. When she finally finds herself alone, away from the detective's eyes, she realizes that the situation is more serious than she ever imagined. She is involved in something much bigger than she initially thought, and now her actions could have serious consequences not only for her but also for her mother. That night, Sarah barely managed to rest. The conversation with the supposed detective and the news on the radio about the suitcase left her in a state of constant alert. Every noise on the street, every sound in the building, made her jump, as if she expected someone to be at her door, ready to confront her about the money. At dawn, with the first rays of sunlight entering through the window, Sarah knows she can no longer postpone her decision. The suitcase hidden under the bed seems to pulsate with the promise of change, but also with imminent danger. She has no other choice. It's time to do the right thing. After a quick breakfast, during which her mother asks once again if everything is okay, Sarah decides to be honest about the situation. She tells her mother about the suitcase and the money, omitting only the most disturbing details to avoid worrying her further. "Sarah, this is very serious," says her mother, her voice laden with concern. "You did well to bring that suitcase home, but now you need to hand it over to the police. We can't get involved in something like this." Her mother's words confirm what Sarah already knows in her heart. She quickly gets dressed, grabs the suitcase, and leaves the house with the determination to resolve the situation once and for all. When she arrives at the police station, Sarah feels the weight of responsibility fall upon her like an avalanche. The imposing building seems like the last barrier between her and the peace of mind she so desperately craves. Inside, she is greeted by an officer who guides her to a room where she can speak with a detective. Detective Richard Holmes, a middle-aged man with a serious expression, listens attentively as Sarah tells her story. She explains how she found the suitcase in the hotel, what was inside, and the strange encounters she had with the detective the day before. With each detail, the detective's face seems to grow more solemn, and Sarah feels the tension increase. When she finishes, Detective Holmes leans back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You did the right thing by coming here, Sarah. The money you found is part of a larger investigation. We're after a gang involved in financial fraud, and that suitcase is a key piece to connecting the perpetrators." Sarah feels a momentary relief upon hearing this, but also a new wave of concern. "And the man who presented himself as a detective? He's one of them, isn't he?" Holmes nods. "Yes, we have reason to believe he's an accomplice of the gang. The fact that you met with him is dangerous, but you made the right decision by not revealing anything to him." The detective pauses before continuing. "We understand that you've been faced with an extremely difficult situation, but your honesty and courage in coming to us will not go unnoticed. We'll ensure that you and your mother are protected." In the days that follow, Sarah's life turns upside down. The police install discreet surveillance around her apartment and at the hotel, ensuring her safety as the investigation progresses. Meanwhile, the investigators uncover more details about the gang, and the suitcase Sarah handed over becomes crucial in unraveling the criminal scheme. Sarah, who initially feared the repercussions of her choice, finds herself gradually involved in a support network offered by the police. Her integrity and cooperation become an example for everyone involved in the investigation. And when the police operation finally arrests the gang leaders, she knows she made the right choice, despite the fear and difficulties. One morning, a few days after the operation concludes, Sarah is called back to the police station. This time, the atmosphere is lighter, and Detective Holmes greets her with a smile. "Sarah, I have good news for you," he begins, as he leads her to a conference room. "Thanks to your help, we were able to dismantle a criminal network that was causing millions in damages. And, as a token of recognition for your act of honesty, the police, in collaboration with other authorities, have decided to offer you a reward." Holmes hands Sarah a check, a significant amount, representing not only the value of the money found, but also compensation for her cooperation. Sarah, who never expected to receive anything in return for her choice, feels a wave of emotions, from relief to gratitude. With the check in hand, Sarah returns home with a new perspective. The morning sun illuminated the small lodge that Sarah named Serenity Lodge. The property, once just a distant dream, now stood amidst the lush nature surrounding Portland. The gentle breeze carried the scent of freshly planted flowers in the garden, a final touch that Sarah had personally chosen. Every corner of the lodge reflected her care and dedication. From the welcoming walls in soft tones to the handcrafted furniture she and her mother had selected together. Sarah walked through the lodge's corridors with light steps, almost floating in a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. It was a stark contrast to the days of anguish she had faced, when the weight of the decision about the money found seemed to crush her. Now, that burden had transformed into a sense of relief and gratitude. The reward she received for her honesty not only brought financial stability, but also the opportunity to start anew. Her mother, who had previously been confined to the small apartment, now moved with more freedom. Her health had improved considerably thanks to the treatments they could finally afford. Life seemed to have resumed a smoother course, and Sarah's mother, with a renewed sparkle in her eyes, stood in the lodge's kitchen, preparing one of the old recipes she loved to make. The smell of fresh bread baking in the oven filled the house, bringing back memories of simpler and happier times. Sitting on the lodge's porch, Sarah reflected on the journey that had led her there. The fresh morning air and the sound of leaves in the wind were a balm for her soul. She thought about the suitcase of money, now a distant memory, but one that had been the catalyst for all the changes in her life. The difficult choice she made to hand the money over to the police, resisting the temptation to use it to solve her immediate problems, had not only avoided a bigger disaster but also proved to herself that honesty and integrity were paths worth following, regardless of the difficulties. As she enjoyed the view of the gardens surrounding the property, where flowers in vibrant colors contrasted with the green of freshly cut grass, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The garden, once just a barren, lifeless plot, now flourished with the same vitality she felt growing within her. Every flower planted, every tree pruned, were symbols of the rebirth she was experiencing in her life. The first guests began arriving at Serenity Lodge, and Sarah welcomed them with a warm smile that reflected the peace she had finally found. The compliments she received about the lodge filled her heart with pride. The serene and welcoming environment she had created was winning over visitors, many of whom promised to return, enchanted by the atmosphere of tranquility they found there. Some guests, already regulars, had become close friends, sharing stories and special moments with Sarah and her mother. One of these guests, a writer who had isolated himself at Serenity Lodge to finish his new book, often sat on the porch with Sarah in the afternoons. He talked about how the lodge's environment seemed to inspire a mental clarity he hadn't experienced in years. These moments of connection with the guests became precious to Sarah, who saw in every conversation an opportunity to learn and grow. At night, as the sun began to set and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Sarah and her mother would gather on the porch, enjoying the silence and the beauty of the surrounding landscape. The golden light of the sunset bathed the lodge, creating an almost magical atmosphere. It was a daily ritual, a moment of introspection and gratitude, where the two women, united by strength and the adversities they had overcome, allowed themselves to simply exist in peace. "You made all this happen, Sarah?" her mother said, holding her hand with a tenderness that spoke more than any words. "I'm so proud of you. You turned a moment of despair into a life full of hope and new opportunities." Her mother's words echoed in Sarah's heart, bringing forth a wave of emotions. She remembered every step of the way, the sleepless nights, the constant fear, but also the courage she discovered within herself. Looking at her mother, now healthier and happier, Sarah felt that all the sacrifice had been worth it. The challenges she faced had strengthened her in ways she never anticipated. Sarah understood that honesty and integrity were not just moral virtues, but the foundations upon which she had built her new life. Everything she had learned during that journey, about herself, about life, and about what really matters, had made her more resilient and confident. As the months passed, the lodge continued to thrive. Sarah began thinking about expanding the business, perhaps adding a few cabins on the surrounding grounds or offering additional activities to guests, like nature walks or cooking classes with her mother's old recipes. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time in many years, she felt excited about the future. One night, as she closed the lodge's doors after a long day, Sarah paused for a moment to gaze at the stars in the night sky. The cool night air enveloped her, and she felt a deep serenity. In that moment, everything seemed to be in the right place. The difficult choices, the internal struggles, and the moments of uncertainty had all been necessary for her to arrive at this point. Now, standing under the stars, Sarah knew she was exactly where she needed to be. The past, with its difficulties and trials, had shaped who she was, but it didn't define her future. With a renewed sense of purpose, Sarah was ready to embrace whatever came next, confident that, no matter the challenges life might bring, she had the strength and courage to face them head-on. She took one last look around the lodge, feeling a wave of gratitude flood her heart. Everything before her, the lodge's success, her mother's regained health, the tranquility she felt within, was proof that choices made with integrity and courage could truly transform a life. "Thank you," she murmured to herself, as if thanking fate, life, and all the decisions that had led her to this moment. With a contented smile, Sarah stepped inside, closing the door behind her, ready for the future that awaited her.